Good afternoon and welcome to the Music and Technology Seminar at Carnegie Mellon. Our guest today is Alex Weston, Carnegie Mellon graduate with a major in composition and currently a self-supporting composer of concert and film music. Our format today will be more conversational, so feel free to ask questions as we go along or hold on to your questions until I encourage you to speak up as we get close to the end time for today's seminar. And now, please welcome Alex Weston to the Music and Technology Seminar at Carnegie Mellon.
Well, Ricardo, thanks for having me. Yeah, so like Ricardo said, if you have any questions or anything like that, just, pipe up and let me know. So me and Ricardo were thinking we'd start by I'll sort of tell you what I did after Carnegie Mellon and sort of how I've sort of made what I hope somewhat resembles a career at this point. So after I graduated Carnegie Mellon, I originally was I applied for grad school to get a grad composition degree, and I ended up getting accepted into Peabody, but sort of decided that I didn't know if I wanted to go right into grad school. And first I kind of wanted to see what it would be like to come to New York and see what the freelance scene sort of looked like. And it is admittedly like it is a fairly difficult scene to break into. But so I was doing basically like any music. Luckily, I was always able to like freelance as a musician. So I was doing a lot of stuff where I was doing like, accompanying. I play piano, so I'd be like accompanying musical theater stuff, vocal coachings, things like that, which is not really what I'm super interested in, but I can do it. And also I was doing a lot of like copyist work is a big source of freelance work for composers when you're besides composing, helping other people get their scores in playable form, things like that. But anyways, so I first moved to New York and I was just kind of, doing odd jobs here and there, and teaching, which I have so much more respect for all my teachers now because it turns out it's really hard and I'm really bad at it. But anyways, so I moved to New York and I didn't really have a huge network here because I went to school in Pittsburgh, but I made a point to kind of reconnect with anyone I knew from like, various summer festivals along the way, went to everyone's shows, met all their friends at the shows, kept, trying to work my way into the scene that way. And did someone say something? I couldn't tell if someone said something or not. Okay. Yeah, if you want me to like clarify anything, maybe just say something in the chat or something just so I can know that. Sorry.
We'll keep you posted on stuff.
Yeah, I couldn't really hear it. Okay. So what was funny was after like a year of, trying to make some headway, I was literally just like went to see a friend of a friend's show, was hanging out at the bar after the show and met Philip Glass's music assistant. And was talking to him and he was saying that they were having a really busy time at the company like then, so offered me a internship. So it was kind of funny that I just sort of stumbled into an internship with Philip Glass. And this was like this isn't like you hear like these like big production houses like Hans Zimmer or a lot of these film guys where it's a very big team of orchestrators and arrangers and producers and synth programmers and copyists and all that. This was like Philip has like one music assistant, and like a copyist. So basically, like, so I helped out there for a little bit. It was an unpaid internship, but went in for a few hours, a few times a week, which was great, and that's sort of all I expected to come from it. But then the guy who was Philip's previous assistant, his career kind of took off, and so he like also was now a pretty successful film composer, named Trevor Gureckis. He does like all the new like M. Night Shyamalan movies, and he did The Goldfinch a few years ago. And anyways, so he was able to leave the day job and just write full time. And I was lucky that I happened to be there, and I had a good rapport with Glass, so I just got hired as the music assistant. And I ended up working with Philip for 8 years. So I ended up never going to grad school. I consider I went to the that's my grad degree from Philip Glass, sort of how I viewed it. which was a great opportunity because it was a part-time job, but it was also salaried, which is very rare to have a salaried music job. And also it was like part-time because he needed a lot of time just also to write, so it gave me a lot of time to keep writing, but still have stable income. And also I had a studio at his office, which was a fully treated room, really nice equipment, great mics, things like that. So I could do like a lot of my projects there. It was also cool because this gave me like some stability where I could take little indie movies or things which had very, very ultra low budget movies to kind of like build my portfolio and start doing more like film scoring that way. It also got me into the room for a lot of projects that I wouldn't have had access to otherwise. Like I was working on movies that had like a $20,000 budget, and then I'd be working with Philip on something that was like a $20 million budget. And the scores I was doing were, we would have the budget to hire 3 musicians, and I would just have them come to my writing room at Glass's office, and we'd record it there for free. But also, so I'm like structuring this sentence terribly. I could record like Philip stuff, which was usually full orchestra in a much bigger production. And the fun thing about that also is that Glass really isn't super interested in recording. Like, he cares about the writing and he wants the recording to sound good, but he's really not particularly interested in going to the recording. So there were multiple times where there's a lot of Eastern European orchestras that do like a lot of like major movies you see like are probably recorded in like Budapest or Croatia or Macedonia, or in our case we used Prague a lot. So like multiple times I went to Prague to do the recording and Philip just kind of stayed in New York. So he just didn't particularly want to go. I mean, after he like trusted me to like turn out a good recording. Anyways. What was I gonna say? And I also got a chance to like, I worked with him on a few Broadway shows where I got to sort of be like de facto music director, and that was pretty cool. But anyway, so like I was saying, so I was working on a lot of my movies and things, but not getting a lot of traction, because a lot of movies and like things like they were good and they were projects I was really proud of, but a lot of them would do film festivals and but not like major ones, and then kind of get dumped like rentable on a streamer, or just sometimes just never come out at all because they just couldn't find distribution. But then I got very lucky because I got to do a project that was called The Farewell. It was an A24 movie a few years ago. If anyone saw that, it was like starring Awkwafina. Anybody? No? Okay. So what happened there was we premiered at Sundance in 2019, and there was a bidding war for it, which was great. But ended up getting bought by A24, which is you probably have heard of. If you're interested in films, they're like one of the biggest indie studios. So yeah, The Farewell came out, was way more successful than I think any of us anticipated. It was like, it ran in theaters for like 3 months. There was like 2 months there where it was in the top 10 for box office sales, which is pretty cool. Also, I got shortlisted for an Oscar for Best Score, which was very, very unexpected. I didn't get nominated, but I got shortlisted, and that was still pretty cool for my first movie that ever went to theaters. So I was very lucky to get to work on that project, but because of the reach that project ended up having, I ended up getting a lot more calls for film scores, and of like a different kind of level. And I managed to get like an agent and all that, which just helped get more film scores. So it's kind of funny. I didn't necessarily set out. I always wanted to do film, but didn't intend for it to be like my like career, but it just sort of like kind of happened. And now that's the bulk of I still do concert works a lot, but the bulk of the work I do is film, because that's sort of just where I've been very lucky. I do love doing it, don't get me wrong. But anyways, losing my train of thought here. So yeah, so anyways, it was also then because of the influx of work that I had from there, I left the day job with Glass, and have just been sort of just writing ever since then. But also what it was very lucky was I so like we had like hired my replacement for the glass job, so we were like overlapping for a few months while like, I could train the new guy. And then I was gonna leave, and like right around like the month I was supposed to leave, COVID happened and everything shut down, and they kept me on payroll and health insurance for a year, which was incredibly nice of them. So yeah, so very grateful to them for that.
So Alex, did you pass the torch along to another CMU person?
No, passed to an NYU's person, I'm sorry. Well, it was also we had like a stream of sort of interns, and they still do have interns there if anyone's interested. But when it was time for me to go, we kind of just figured out which intern Philip likes the best. And that's the guy who did it. What was I going to say? Yeah, so since then I've still been writing. I've had a few more movies and projects. I live in Bushwick in Brooklyn. If anyone's familiar with neighborhoods, I have a duplex apartment, so the basement is my studio. Here, I'll give a quick little tour. All right, over there we got some synths. Okay, my piano, got some more synths over there. Little workspace. But I don't record here. I just write here, and then I do my actual recording. I rent a studio when it's time to do the actual finished project. I don't know if you want to hear my most recent project that came out. Is a mini series for Amazon Prime called Expats, starring Nicole Kidman. It premiered about 2 months ago. It's a 6-episode mini series, and next thing I have coming out is this summer. I did a documentary for National Geographic, and that will be coming out, I think, in August, but they don't really talk to me about distribution plans. But yeah, so that's how I got to where I am now.
Hey, so let's see something.
You want to see something now? No questions about any of that stuff?
I'm curious to know, do you ever get to see the big star or to meet them?
Yeah, I meet all of them. Yeah, when we have premieres and parties and stuff. Yeah, I've gotten to meet a lot of cool people. Actually, the funniest recent one. Well, the funny thing is, like, usually, like when you go to a premiere or something like this as the composer, like as a composer, you work in post-production, right? Like the movie's shot, I don't go to set. So the only people I really talk to are like the director, maybe a producer, usually the editor, right? So when you go to a premiere, and like my girlfriend's a costume designer, so she's on set, right? We go to her premieres, and it's like a family reunion. Everyone who spent 3 months together somewhere, and everyone's so excited to see each other. No one has any idea who I am. So it's always very funny because it's just like, you meet the actors and they're like, they have no idea who you are, but it's just like, well, I watched your face for 8 hours a day for a month, so I feel like I know you. I don't know. Some have been cooler than others. But the funny story I'll tell about this is, so I had this new project, Expats, and we had our our official premiere, which was like a red carpet thing at the Museum of Modern Art in New York. And the night before the premiere, the director had a cocktail party at her apartment for like inner circle, right? So it was just like some people from the cast, like the department heads, things like that. And I intentionally went very late because I didn't want I wanted that for the reason I was talking about, like everybody knows each other, right? I wanted to come when the party was already going. So I got there like an hour late, and I was the third person there. And it was the director, one of the producers, and Nicole Kidman. Which was very funny because she was just like, with an Australian accent, like, "Hi, I'm Nicole." And it's like, I know who you are. You're you're very famous. She was very nice though. She was also a producer on the show, so she was pretty familiar with the music and had heard it in all iterations. So that was cool.
So did more people show up later?
Yeah, but I think I was the start of the wave of people. Yeah, ultimately it was like, 30, 40 people showed up, but I just saw like 15 minutes of FaceTime. I mean, this isn't helpful or informative, but just the other funny story I have like this is I had a movie that came out last summer called The Adults, which starred Michael Cera. And similarly, the place where they had our opening party, I was just chatting with him. And then they invited way too many people to the party, so there was no way to move. So I just kind of got stuck with Michael for like the entirety of the party because we couldn't walk because it was just way too crowded. So yeah, we get to meet the people sometimes. I don't know. Any other questions about that kind of stuff, or should I show a thing?
Let's see the
I
film.
Did someone?
Wait, question there, somebody?
I have a question. I'm curious. So, like, obviously, a lot of like movie stuff happens in LA. I'm
Mhm.
curious, what if you've like had to go to LA to do certain things, or if you can largely do stuff remote, or if there's like stuff happening in New York. What does that kind of look like?
So stuff does happen in New York. A lot of stuff happens in LA, and I do go to LA a fair amount, but not a ton. Like maybe 2 or 3 times a year, I probably end up going. I'm going next month for the final mix of a movie I did. There is a film scene in New York. So the thing is, a lot of editing happens in New York, is something I've found. Like this show I'm talking about, they, the director and everybody's LA based, but they edited it in New York for a few months. But yeah, I mean, there's definitely projects where like you won't get it unless you're in LA. But also, if that's the case, there's always like a chance to go out for a couple of months, sublet or something, which I may end up doing later this year. But no, there is a scene in New York for sure. In terms of fully remote, like if you're talking about, if you want to be working from like Des Moines or something, like I mentioned, like I sort of got started by like trying to meet everyone I could and like going to lots of like film events and screenings and festivals and stuff. And that's not really happening outside of New York or LA. So like there are people who are in New York or LA and get their career rolling and then move somewhere else. But like I think if you're starting out, like I think it is really helpful to be in New York or LA. Anybody else?
Yeah, I had a question.
Oh, okay. What's up?
Okay. Yeah. I heard you were saying that you worked with projects that are like that have a budget of like 20,000 versus 20 million. For various reasons. One of them being efficiency. How do you decide like till what level of intricacy you wanna work on for the lower budget products? So like you can't have an equal attention to detail for those kind of projects. So like where do you decide to draw a line?
Well, I'm sorry, I'm not totally sure I understand your question. I'm sorry.
So for example, so there's this film that has a budget of 20 million. So, the room for error or like imperfections are very low there versus a project that costs, the budget is like 20,000, which means it's fine if you don't have an equal attention to detail and you might be working on like bigger projects too. So like how do you decide?
So the level isn't attention to detail or perfection. Like it always has to be perfect.
Right.
At the level you're working, it always has to be perfect. What changes from the level of the budget though is the scale of the score, right? So usually when you do a film, the way the budget is structured is it's called an all-in deal. And that's the case for like almost all movies, unless you're like John Williams. So the way an all-in deal works is they have their budget for original score and they give all of it to me, right? And out of that budget, I have to pay my agent, my lawyer, all of the musicians, any copyists, book the studio, any assistants, and whatever is left over is what I get to take home. So the problem with this system is it kind of encourages you to do things on the cheap a little. But the thing is, though, if they give you, like, I'm trying to like if they give me a music budget of $100,000, they're expecting like $100,000 worth of score, sort of. And similarly, if there's like, they're giving you that budget if what's discussed is, and this is discussed in a negotiation, is like how big an ensemble has to be hired, right? Like, if I'm doing a movie and the all-in music budget is $20,000, they can't expect a full string orchestra because that would cost $40,000. So it's like usually the contract, like, and then in the negotiation that like, if you gave me $20,000, we're doing a score that's 5 musicians, right? And similarly, like what's kind of funny is like that movie I mentioned, The Adults, was a very, very low budget movie because what happened is they weren't even supposed to have a score. The director, it was his 5th feature, and none of them have ever had a score before. And then they decided to add a score. And so they didn't have anything in the budget really for it. But I really wanted to do the project because I also partially had a bunch of friends affiliated with it. The director was very cool. Cast was cool. And, we sort of worked out like, it was doable because we were like, it wasn't a very heavily scored movie. There was maybe like 25 minutes worth of music. And we decided to score it for 3 musicians. Right? So it's like, with the budget, it always has to be right. It's just you make a score that works within the budget that's available.
Right.
Does that make sense? Or does that answer your question?
Yeah, that makes sense. So I guess like I'm trying to ask from the standpoint because like, so even as students, we work on different assignments. Sometimes I don't think I'm able to figure out like how to equally allocate, how to best allocate my efforts into multiple things. So I was just trying to figure out how you go about
Yeah.
that.
Well, I'm usually only on like 1 or 2 movies at a time.
Okay.
I also have like, I don't have anybody salaried, but like I pretty regularly will pick up assistants for brief periods of time. And I'll have them do stuff where like, I don't have ghostwriters, but I can do stuff like I'll write the material, but instead of orchestrating it out for 5 strings, I'm playing it on a string ensemble patch, right?
Right.
And then do a couple of synth pads and then give it to an assistant to be like, make this, mix this better, add more detail to the MIDI, and like, because like, if you said, this is something I'm going to talk about in a second too, but like, when you do like, you should learn, if you want to look into film scores or stuff like this, I highly, highly recommend like learning how to make realistic MIDI demos, like how to work with sample libraries, because you have to make a demo that sounds real enough that the director can tell what it's supposed to sound like. So there's like all of these companies, like, you should really know how to use basically all the native instrument suites, like Contact and sample building there, like all the Spitfire stuff, which like I have given that company entirely too much money over the years to like for orchestral libraries. But you can do stuff with the MIDI continuous controller data, like to add expression data or the amount of vibrato or the number of players and things like that. And like you can spend all day getting in the weeds of making it as close as possible. But sometimes like that, if I'm overworked, I have someone else, you make it more real. So stuff like that you can kind of hand off. And yeah, just in terms of allocating your time, you're also a student right now, so you have a ton of classes, and believe it or not, it's actually like we only have 1 or 2 things to do at a time. When I'm working, I don't have a full course load. I have a movie to work on, or maybe 2. So
Yeah.
I think it actually gets easier in a way.
That's good to know.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you so much.
Are you a composer or a tech person?
I'm a tech person, but I think this is a generally applicable problem. Like,
Yeah, no, for sure.
yeah. Yeah, thanks a lot.
Of course. Anybody else?
So Alex, I know from what I remember of you from your college days,
This can only be good.
You seem to be incapable of doing anything halfway or doing anything sloppy. So when you have a small budget, do you shortcut things and just say, well, I'm not going to, it's not going to be a great, or do you really pour everything that you have into it, no matter
I
what it is?
I try my best to to always make it as good as it can. But I mean, like, because I don't know, that's how you keep getting hired for stuff. Gotta sound good. I mean, ultimately, of course, like you can't. There's always more stuff that can be done and more stuff that can be finessed. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, like, if I'm taking a project, like I want to do it right, And also there's things like uh the money. Don't get me wrong, money is important. But like there are projects that you do that like you do because it's more important to do the project than to make the money, if that makes sense. And like there are things which I've done which are like lower budget, to the point where it's just like, all right, this is like, my accountant might say, why are you bothering? But it's like there's projects you do because like I'm not trying to like rag on this project, but the one I mentioned from last summer, the one which, they added a score last minute is like, the director is not like the director's this guy, Dustin Guy-Defa, who's not a household name, but like is a cult filmmaker. Like all directors I talk to are film nerds, like love this guy's movies. So he's a film nerd director. So it's just like, it's worth it for me to for people to know that I worked with this guy, And then there's other projects you do where like, yeah, it is more, there's definitely projects I've done where I've been like, this is a gig, that pay well and are often easier. But, you kind of do like, it's the expression like one for them, one for you, Also, like I do non-film stuff as well. Like if you can get into ad work a little bit, like you do a few commercials a year and you can do a lot of indie movies. Yeah, and I'll just say like the way that the ad work kind of stuff does. And I don't do this regularly, but I have friends where this is like all they do is there's a bunch of ad music agencies that you can kind of get on their radar. And what they do is when they get a client, they call, 10 composers that they think would be a good fit. And you get like $200 to pitch a track. But if you win, you can get like 15 grand. So like, it's kind of like a cattle call. But I have friends who, are on rosters for all these different ones and write 2 of these spots a day and maybe win once a month. But it's just like a numbers game for that kind of work. So yeah, there's other stuff. So like that's the kind of stuff that allows you to consider what projects you're doing and like let you devote the time and the effort into things that are less lucrative, but more maybe like artistically satisfying. I feel like, am I getting too into the weeds about money?
No, because everyone has to know, what can I do after I'm out of college, right?
Yeah. Nick, you heard about ad music being lucrative. Yes, but the thing is not all ad houses let you keep the royalties. A lot of the time it's work for hire. So there's like some shadier houses where it's like all work for hire. One of the ones I work with, you like split the writer share. Do you like the writer share, publisher share kind of thing? Yeah, so it's like you split the writer share with them. So it's like it is nice, and it's especially like the royalties aren't huge from doing a commercial, but if you do like 20 commercials, I mean, even like getting a movie into a theater, like US theaters don't pay royalties into ASCAP. But European ones do. So like, you start doing a couple movies and they, it does a US streaming run and you don't really get a lot of royalties, but it streams in Europe. And so like you pays a lot more out of there. So yeah, it's sort of like royalties are nice, but it sort of is like your first couple years writing, your ASCAP statement is going to be like $30. But then you just keep amassing things that are accruing royalties and mailbox money, and eventually it like starts to be kind of interesting. But it takes a while.
Okay, so let's see something that you've done.
Okay. You're talking about money, Ricardo?
No, I'm talking about film and music.
Yes, yes. Okay. Okay, why is this not? All right. I mean, it's the business side of thing, Ricardo. It's important. They gotta know what to do after college. Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay, so it has to load this template right now, which is going to take a few minutes because I have a very large template, and now that I just shared sound, it reloads all the template, which is a bummer about Zoom. Any other questions while we're watching this progress bar?
Yeah, sure. I guess I have a question. Just about, your personal taste and things like that. Do you like to write more for kind of orchestral, acoustic textures, or do you like to write more, synthesized kind of sounds? What's your take on that whole spiel?
I like to work much more in like the orchestral chamber kind of world. Like, there's definitely a fair amount of like electronics and things that you have to do in film scores, because it's sort of the case of modern film scores, but like I'm not particularly interested in like doing like big super synth heavy scores aren't really my interest.
Sure.
Yeah, I also like, it's kind of funny, Ricardo, like I think college Alex would hate present day Alex's music, because like everything I wrote in college was like fast and a million tempo changes and key changes, and everything was mixed meter and really complicated. And now I'm like whole notes.
I tell current composition students, you better watch, because if you hand somebody a piece of music and they can't sit down and play it, you could be in trouble.
Oh yeah, no, 100%. Yeah, so I feel like also like my music is, I like to write more motivic and melodic and tonal in a way. So it's just like, a lot of modern film scores, there's kind of a gray area between whether it's sound design or composition, if that makes sense. Like, especially in like horror movies, it's like the line becomes really blurred. And like I've done a few horror movies, but the ones I've done have been kind of more, it's been an opportunity where it could be something like tonal and melodic instead of just like scratchy noises. Okay, do you guys see Nicole Kidman?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is a scene from Expats, the show I was talking about. It was kind of hard to find a scene I wanted to show you guys that was musically kind of interesting, but also not like a spoiler. So what's happening in this scene is this young woman she's working just like a catering job that she gets assigned to, and realizes that the 50th birthday party she's been assigned to work at is the party for a family which she has a sordid past with, to put it mildly. So it's her realizing where she is and who else is at this party. And then also the mother of the family, Nicole Kidman's character, thinking she spots this person and trying to find her in this big party. That was very vague. Here we go.
Go missing like that.
You hear it?
Yeah, but it's also kind of cool, I mean, you know where everything is now. So you
Turn it up a little, Alex.
It's totally not cool if you're on a plane.
Excuse me. But it's not fun if you're on the plane that crashes either. But the fact that something could just
Oh, is that chocolate milk?
That's her recognizing the family's kid and starting to realize where she is.
Margaret. Margaret, hi. I just want to say thank you for having me to the party. Margaret!
Oh, there you are. Do you have any more of those,
Margaret, why is she here?
Ta-da! Okay.
Whoa, that was dramatic.
Yes, it's a very dramatic show. So yeah, so let me just show you like kind of my template. So I don't really have like a set template, just this is sort of the one I made for this show. So these here are the strings, right? And like, so I have can you guys still see the screen? Is this good?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I'm using Spitfire BBC Orchestra for this one, which is like sort of one of the industry standards. I say like pretty much everybody uses this one. There is a free version of it, by the way, which is great if you don't know how to use sample libraries. You can get that and kind of learn how they work. Because I mean, this is the full version one, and it's like, sorry? No. So this is the I mean, this is the full version is like $500-600, honestly. But you can play around with the free one, which is also super great. It's just it doesn't have like all the articulations and all of the ensembles. So I have it set up so each MIDI channel here are all going into the same instance of Spitfire. So like if I record like that was me hitting my keyboard, like if I play on the MIDI Pits one, it cues the pizzicato sample, right? And so I have all my strings here. So yeah, different like pizz, spiccato, legato tracks. Here we had some guitar, which we did record, but don't tell anyone, we secretly kept in some MIDI because it was just really clean. The piano I use here is another like Spitfire one. Bunch of fun synths. And we also had this recurring thing that was sort of this ominous riser that I built this cue around. Which was me just recording a violinist shifting an octave and then slowing it down and pitch shifting it. Here I have it kind of set up like pads, all of my like textural things. And these are from various libraries. Like I was saying, like it's really helpful if you're interested in doing this kind of stuff. Or honestly, I'm assuming some people here are interested in like pop production. Like you should know Contact like inside out. Yeah, what was I gonna say? So basically so I write to picture, right? And so with a scene like this, there's a lot of needing to try to hit specific moments and beats. And so you have to do a lot of really finagly things with tempos. Like, here there's stuff where the difference between these two tempos is like 1.8 BPM. Like no one's ever going to notice that. Or here when it gets 0.6 faster, it's like the audience doesn't notice, but like you have to hit like specific beats that way. So there's a lot of like trial and error and math to do to hit the because like right here we have to have a big tempo change to, come on, why are you being annoying, Logic? Okay. Like how to time this grid. So we have it right there, like that kind of moment when she recognizes the husband. Yeah, and then also, so what I also have is they're not here right now in this file, but I have like all of my strings from any library sent to a string bus, winds, keys, pads, guitar, bass, percussion, and there's a lot of voice on the score as well. And so it's not in this one, but in the process of working on it, like we also had a music editor on the project. So when I would deliver a cue, I would also print all of the stems. And if you have everything bussed this way, I can just, hit record as it's playing back and just print all the individual stems at one time, because then this gives the music editor, flexibility to try to do his job. Yeah, and then once the score is approved, I usually send this out to a copyist, and they take the MIDI data from here and dump it into notation software. Well, I mean, for the things we have to record, drop it in notation software. I use Dorico. Highly recommend it. I think it's the future. Even though I was a Sibelius person for a long time. And yeah, and then we do a recording session, and then I don't so all of this string stuff gets replaced by real strings, which here you can hear my the difference between Whoa, why does that sound bad? Okay. I don't know why it's buzzed wrong, so don't worry about it. But yeah, the difference between MIDI strings and what we have here, which is there's a 20-person string section. Yeah, it's pretty enormous, even if you have good samples.
So you had actual strings for this?
Yes, this was. Yeah, here's the fake strings. That's not great, but it's pretty good. But the real strings are obviously better. Yeah, any questions about the way this is set up or anything like that?
So do you actually play the keyboard that shows up in the film?
Yes, I'm playing piano on it.
So you can movies and you see this movie and you know that it's you playing the piano.
It is. Would you like to hear a funny story about? Can I close screen sharing, or does anyone have any questions about how this is set up? Actually, I'll just say this funny story about the piano, which is we recorded the piano in New York on a Yamaha C7 concert grand, and this director is she's like super detail oriented. Like, Ricardo, you said I don't like to half-ass anything. This person's microscope. So we record the piano, and like a week after we recorded it, she called me and she said that she didn't like the sound of the piano. Because she said it sounded way too grand and epic for, a dark family drama, right? So I book a studio with a Steinway upright, and we record it. And she's back in LA at this point. She listens to it and says, well, this doesn't sound right. We have 20 strings. And so this upright sounds too small. So she wanted to do it a third time. And this time she wanted me to come to LA so that she could be in the studio and make sure she knew it was what she wanted. Right? So I was like, that's fine. I'm not going to pick the studio. I guessed twice. You choose the piano you want. Right? So this director is good friends with the composer Nicholas Bertel, who did the show Secession, among a million other things. So she asked Nick, what's your favorite piano in LA? Where did you record Secession? Right? So she books that studio. I fly to LA. I get to the studio. Guess what kind of piano it is?
Yamaha A6 Grand?
Yamaha C7. It was the one we used in the first place.
Okay. The same piano.
Same piano.
But in LA. That was very funny. But in fairness, we recorded it differently though. So we did address her problem, but it was very funny that it ended up being the exact same piano. Yeah, what we did was she said that it sounded too bright and epic. So what we did is we did, instead of having condensers slammed inside the piano, right? We used ribbon mics further away and played everything way softer. Someone has a chat. Everyone knows LA pianos hit different. Yeah, that's true. Great point. Yeah. So any questions about how this stuff works, or any technical questions about like film scoring or stuff like that?
So you never actually took a film scoring class at CMU,
You guys didn't have one.
but you learned all the skills that you needed.
Well, I did a lot of student films when I was at CMU. You know, just meeting people. It was really, there was a lot of people in the art department or the English department. Not a lot of people in the drama department were making movies. Yeah, no, I mean, talking about, yeah, learned everything I had to do to write music. Some of the specific technical things I think I had to kind of figure out, or, you know, learn from doing. But like a lot of the stuff like sample libraries and stuff like that, you know, we didn't really have a lot of focus on. So I would suggest if you want to pursue this route, like get real good at sample libraries and orchestral rendering. But yeah, no, I definitely like started doing it while I was at Carnegie Mellon.
And do you still play the piano like professionally or just for your own pleasure?
I was better in college, to be honest with you. I still play, like I play on my scores. I play every day, but it's kind of funny. Like I used to practice 2 hours a day, 3 hours a day when I was at Carnegie Mellon. And now I don't really have the time to do that because I'm, you know, writing 8 hours a day. So it is kind of funny though, because like, especially like I was, when I was at CMU, I was like very into jazz, and I'm not quite as much anymore. But it's kind of funny, like now I'll try to play jazz and like the brain knows what it wants to do, but like the hands can't do it, you know? So it's just like, I'll know the riff I'm trying to play, but like my hand's like a can of peas, just like rolling up and down the piano, just doesn't. So I'm actively trying to like get my chops back up, but they've fallen quite a bit.
We probably have some recordings still in our hard drive, you know, the archives of you playing jazz here.
Probably. Like I'm not proud to admit this, but like I had like a chamber concert for something recently, and it was coming out of a really crazy time crunch where like I had 2 films and this concert piece. Like the concert piece like due a week after the 2 films, and like I knew I was gonna be performing the concert, and I was like, I went through the piano part and I was like, I'm gonna make this a little easier. It's like I don't have as much time to practice as I thought I did. I'm gonna make this a little easier.
Okay, so are there other questions out there from anybody? Come on, speak up. Anybody?
I could pop in with another question if that's all right.
No, bother with all of the questions, whoever has them.
Yeah, I'm in the studio actually, but hey.
Oh,
so,
right there. Sorry.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Just I guess what's your general way of approaching a score? Like you're looking at this, you know, this silent film. Do you generally kind of have like a melodic motif that comes up first? Do you try to hit certain cues with certain timings, or what's your general process?
So there is something called a spotting session, which is the first step of any score. And this is not me, this is pretty universal.
Okay.
So what a spotting session is you sit down with the director and you watch the movie and you talk and deliberate and argue over every single moment and why there should or should not be music. Right? So like you take, you know, like you'll watch the first minute and then pause it and be like, should we have something here? Like, is this overkill if we do it? If we do want music, is it coming here? What do we want? If we do have music here, like what is it doing? You know? So it's like, it can take a day or 2 days to go through a 2-hour movie, because you're like stopping and arguing and figuring out exactly what you want and where you want music and what you want to express. And, you know, I find directors usually, I'm the first one to suggest taking out music, and not because I want my job to be easier. It's because I feel like people overuse music in movies. Like you know, not every director, but there's some directors where I'll work with them and they'll be like, okay, we need music here that's sad. And it's just like, well, the actress is crying. Like, we know she's sad. Why am I adding this?
Right, right.
So there's a lot of like debating that kind of thing. Or this isn't totally related to your question, but like my biggest pet peeve is sometimes I've had directors like, you start to think that they're trying to use music to fix a performance they don't like. You know? It's
Yeah.
just like, she doesn't look mad. I can't make her madder. You know? But that does happen. Yeah, and then depending on the movie, but like I generally pick important scenes, you know. I try not to do like, I don't try to start with like the climax, because that sort of has to be like the culmination of material, but just like scenes that, because obviously not all music in a score matters. Like sometimes there's moments where like you are just a transition or a little something, and there are moments where it's meteor, you know?
Yeah.
So it's, I try to pick like a few scenes that are like important, but not the most important thing in the entire movie, to start finding the harmonic language and the sound. And once we start honing that in, like, then you do the big climactic one where it's like, this is the purest distillation of the theme in its grandest form. And like, you can't start from there.
Right, right.
So not the most important scene, but not the least important scene is generally where I try to start. I generally recommend making like a batch of things. Like, don't send directors cues as you write them. Give them enough stuff, especially your first pass, that they have an idea of what you're going for.
Right, right.
And the other thing to be wary of also is when people edit, they use temp music. So they use pre-existing pieces of music. And often there's a problem, and this is referred to as temp love, where it's a director has been watching their movie for months with temp music, and they have gotten so used to it that it can be very difficult to break them from it.
That's very interesting.
Yeah, and actually, sometimes it can be really difficult to do, because also like whatever you're sending, like inherently isn't gonna sound as good, because their temp music is from a finished product. It's already been recorded with real strings and mixed properly and is done. So not only do they love it, it just sounds better.
Right.
You're coming in and being like, here's some shit MIDI samples that you've heard before, and I'm replacing a piece of music that you already love.
Yeah.
So it's like there's a lot of like working out how the collaboration works between you and a director. And yeah, I think I kind of lost the plot on your question a little, but
No, I think that's
yeah.
things I would not have thought about the process.
So Alex, here's one. How and when do you get paid for a project? And do you have an accountant?
So you get paid usually in installments. You usually get paid when you start. For indies, especially if it's not like a huge budget, you get paid when you start and you get paid when you finish. Right? Bigger projects, they split it up even further. Like sometimes it's like there's one I'm on now where it's 4 installments, where it's like, I got it when I signed on. I got a quarter when I spotted the film. I get a quarter when it's approved. And I get a quarter when it's recorded. And that's just complicated. But the other funny thing about this, especially when it's 2 installments, is a project can go on for months. So there have been many times where like, I will start a project, get paid a little, and then not make any money at all for like 4 months. Which can be like, and then granted you get like a nice chunk of change, but you get paid for those 4 months. But it is sometimes towards the end of a project, I'm like, I could really go for get that second installment now. Yeah, and also I have a manager, and they like kind of do all the invoicing and stuff on my behalf, and then they chase people down and negotiate the fees and stuff, which is nice to not have to do that yourself, because I don't know. First of all, people who do the business side of thing are better at it. And also it's nice to like remove yourself from that conversation and just keep your involvement purely creative.
So do you still see CMU people around in LA or New York or anywhere?
Yes. So I don't really work with a ton of CMU people, except for like a handful of string players. Yeah, so there's not like the New York musician contingency, especially so I'm the only, to my knowledge, like of the CMU composers that I know from my time there. All the ones that are in New York are doing musical theater.
Mhm.
So like I still see like Scott Wasserman, but like we don't work together.
Mhm.
Yeah, so I don't really like have a lot. I don't really work with a ton of CMU people, but I still have all my friends from college and who I still talk to all the time, but less so in a professional environment.
Alex, what is the schedule like for writing? Like once you get through the spotting session, I guess by then the movie is edited and they want to put it out. So how much time is typically goes by?
Yeah, do you ever get writer's block?
So it turns out deadlines are actually really inspirational for writer's block, Ricardo. And I do have some tricks for writer's block when it does happen. But to answer Professor Denneberg's question. Hello, how's it going?
Good.
So it varies wildly from project to project. So this TV show that I was talking about today, this most recent project, I was on for like over a year, doing other stuff at the same time, but it's just like they had to like do pickup shoots for other things, and that would kind of like delay the process for a while. I'd say standard is probably like 6 weeks to 2 months for a movie.
Mhm.
But it can also be really, really compressed, especially in the indie world, because like I've also done a bunch of projects. Like the first one I mentioned, the Farewell, that one that was my first one that went to theaters, I had about 3 weeks, because they were editing it, and then they got into Sundance, and then they had to meet the deadline. Like it had a screening, and it's like, okay, we have 3 weeks to write this and record it, or else it's not going to be in the DCP to go to the festival. But yeah, there's lots of things that can compress the schedule. Like I just helped out a friend of mine on a score where they had another composer on it, and they ended up firing the composer. So that guy took up half the time and half the budget. So it was like, okay, we have 3 weeks and no money. Let's get it done. So that also happens a lot, by the way.
Have you ever missed a deadline?
No, I have been fired a few times, but that actually happens. That actually happens a lot, but more than you'd think. Like when I was working with Philip, we get fired all the time too. Yeah, I actually just got fired from a movie about a month ago. Which happens, and you still like get some payment as a kill fee. But yeah, if they're just not feeling what you're doing, you can get replaced. It happens. Yeah. In terms of writer's block, Ricardo, one thing that I think makes it easy to not really have writer's block is, or at least the way I kind of approach it, is like something has to go there, right? We need to have music here, and like whether or not your first draft is what you end up using, like it's also just having a picture in front of you can be inspiring. Like I know what beats I have to hit, I know what moments I need to score, and just like if I'm not feeling particularly inspired, I feel like I'm able to be like, well, I need to have something, and this is something, and get that down, and then while I'm working on another cue, might come up with a better idea and double back. But I just kind of feel like my way of getting over the writer's block is to write and not worry if it's not. I know it sounds kind of dumb, but just to write and not worry if it's good or perfect, right? Because like once something's on the page or something's in Logic, you can improve it and you can replace it, but you can't improve or refine nothing. So yeah, that's just sort of always how I've kind of felt about writer's block, is just you can't just like zero in on not having anything. Like just do something, even if it's bad, it might give you a better idea, just the process of making it. Just sort of my approach.
Are there anything in the chat window that we should take a look at?
While you're looking, I just wanted to say for people that haven't done this, just writing 10 minutes for orchestra is like a senior year project for composition majors at CMU. And to think that you're writing a whole film in 6 weeks, I mean, even if you've got the 6 weeks, that's a lot of writing.
Well, I mean, also, like, I mean, I did my senior orchestral piece. Writing that kind of music also is like a lot slower process and a lot more painstaking. The other thing is like to work in film, like or in ads or really anything, like this is just one piece of advice to impart on impressionable youths is it helps to get fast. Like deadlines are really quick and like so far this year, I did the math the other day, I've written and recorded like 3.5 hours of music. You know, some of it I'd written towards the end of last year, but like in terms of finalizing projects, wrote a lot. And like, you know, even if you're doing ad work, like oftentimes you'll get a brief at like 4 p.m. and they're like, can we have it by 11 a.m. tomorrow? You know? Like, you know, we're talking about a 30-second or a minute ad, but like they don't want a sketch. They want something that can, in a quality that it can air in that way. You know, so it's just like, it helps a lot to learn how to stay creative, not to sound all artsy fartsy, but like creativity is a muscle, you know? And like, if you get used to writing every day and writing material every day and like, I realize I'm going to kind of contradict what I said to someone before a little bit. But like, learning that not everything you write has to be this genius magnum opus, but just learning how to make music that you're proud of and works and is perfect. But like, you know, I have a lot of friends who work on an album for like 8 years, you know? And then they're surprised when it doesn't blow up the world. And you're like, because no one knows you because you've written 45 minutes in 8 years. You know, like it really is helpful to like learn how to get things done right and perfect, but not devote, you know, like totally getting into the weeds and finagling every aspect, like learning how to make good music quickly, you know?
So Alex, you wrote a piece for your senior project at Carnegie Mellon?
I did.
An orchestra piece. Did you win the award for that piece?
No, I did not, and I shouldn't have. What I was saying before about how everything I wrote had to be really complicated, I wrote an unplayable piece.
Wow.
Well, I didn't write an unplayable piece. Here was the mistake I fell into. I kind of come from a jazz background, right? And I was playing in jazz band and stuff like that. I didn't think the rhythms I wrote were particularly difficult. Notoriously, orchestral players are not the tightest rhythmically. And I was trying to have a really tight polyrhythm, played by 30 strings? It's not going to sound tight. So I was proud of the piece. The performers, you know, I wrote a difficult piece for which they had 45 minutes of rehearsal or whatever they get. I did not win. Who won my year was Bill Yanish, who was a brilliant composer, and now he's killing it as a music director in DC. But I haven't seen him since graduation, but I know what he's up to.
Okay, I think we're already out of time. So Alex, thank you so much for doing this.
Pleasure.
I just have one little announcement for anyone else who's out there watching, and that is that thing that you see behind me here. This is the 64 speaker array thing that John Kolar will demonstrate at 6:30 today for my multi-track recording class. So anyone who wants to show up and check out this demonstration, please come by 6:30 tonight. Alex, thank you so much for doing this.
No, my pleasure. Thanks for reaching out.
And we'll stay in touch, okay?
Yes, I'm around.
All right.
Bye. Thanks,
Bye
everyone.
now. Oh, we had a lot of people here. Should we stop recording?
Yeah.